Hi everyone, okay, this is Magnus Carlsen against Veselin Topalov, which was played at the M-Tel Masters Tournament a couple of days ago. Magnus Carlsen, if you don't know him, is Norwegian and the world number 3, rated at 2770, and he's only 18 years old. He became Grandmaster age 13 and has just been smashing top players ever since. He is definitely one to keep an eye on to become world champion in the future. And at the moment he is in the qualifying rounds for the 2011 World Championship cycle, and he's just a phenomenal player who has an excellent memory and plays a very wide range of openings. Really interesting to watch. And Veselin Topalov, on the other hand, is from Bulgaria, where this tournament is taking place, and ranked number 1 in the world at the moment with a rating of 2812, although Vishy Anand of course is world champion. And Topalov has earned the right to play him later this year or early next year for the title, so that should be interesting too. But anyway, to get into this game, Carlsen had the white pieces and he opened with d4, and came d5, c4 and c6, which is going into the Slav variations of the Queen's Gambit declined. So knight f3, knight f6, and it's all book moves really, which continue up until about move 17 in this game. And here at this stage Carlsen played bishop takes f6, which surrenders the bishop pair but gets a good lead in development and a stronger center after the queen recaptures, and this continuation, which as I said is all normal developing moves for this line. And now you see Carlsen has the classic strong center with mobile pawns on e4 and d4, so it's yeah, it's good for white. And this is all still book up until here, and yeah, it's the last book move. And at this point white already has a slight advantage, and what Topalov is doing with his last move a6 is just preparing to play c5 in order to free his bishop on b7, and playing a6 prepares this by protecting the pawn on b5. So then came h4 from Carlsen, and bishop a8 from Topalov, which is a bit cautious and maybe a bit passive as well. Like, he could have played c5 here without any real danger, although it would have lost the bishop pair, and maybe that's what he wanted to avoid. So Carlsen played rook c2, and then came rook d c8, as c5 wasn't possible here. Let's have a look at that. c5, then bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, and d5, and white would have the advantage here because taking the pawn on d5 would be bad for black, and meanwhile white will be able to cramp black's game and apply good pressure by doubling the rooks on the c file and then playing d6. So c5 isn't possible, so he plays rook d c8, and then came rook d c1 and queen f8, and again c5 isn't playable. If c5, then bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, knight e4, c4, b3, knight b6, knight d6, and white will win a pawn here, and his resulting position will be stronger than black's. So it's a great play from Carlsen, who here played a4, and now Topalov played c5, and maybe he was getting frustrated because of Carlsen's prophylactic play, and it really wasn't the right time to open the position up, as now it favours white. Like, better here would have been b4 instead, and say knight b1, c5, and bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, which at worst is equal and may even favour black slightly. So it's not too bad, but he wanted to liberate his bishop pair, I think, and played c5. So then came a takes b5 and c takes d4, which is better than a takes b5, because then would come bishop takes a8, and after rook takes a8, knight takes b5, c takes d4, knight on b takes d4, and again white has won a pawn, so it's no good. So c takes d4, knight takes d4, and bishop takes e4 from Topalov, which wasn't the best move. Simply a takes b5 was better, because after this move the knight is going to recapture, and white will have two very strong central knights against a relatively passive knight on d7 and inactive bishop on g7. And also bad here was bishop takes e5, because then comes knight c6, bishop takes c6, and bishop takes c6 with good advantage for white. So anyway, the game. was bishop takes c4 and knight takes e4. Rook takes c2 and rook takes c2 from Carlsen. And capturing with the queen here was an interesting option, like say queen takes c2 and then knight takes e5, which is better than a takes b5 because then f4 imprisons black's bishop, at least temporarily. So knight takes e5, then b takes a6, rook b4, and white has a dangerous passed pawn. But the reason Carlsen probably didn't go for this is because black gets counterplay, and he probably wanted to keep that to a minimum. So he recaptured with the rook at this stage. Then came a takes b5, knight c6, rook b6, and f4, again with the same ideas about limiting the scope of this bishop, and freeing the action of the bishop with kingside pawn moves would be dangerously weakening, so he's not going to go for that. And at this stage white definitely has an edge, like his rook on the open file here and his minor pieces are much better placed and more active than black's. So he's got the advantage, and now he has to exploit it, and he does that expertly. After queen a8 comes knight to e7 check, king h7, which is the only decent move, and then h5, which is in fact a very strong move and the first step towards the tactical threats that ruin Topalov later in the game. And for now the pawn can't be taken. If g takes h5, then it's mate in 6, but knight g5 check, h takes g5, queen takes h5 check, bishop h6, queen takes f7 check, bishop g7, queen g6 check, king h8, queen h5 check, bishop h6, and queen takes h6 is mate. So it has to be left alone for now. And Topalov played rook a6, and then came h takes g6 check, and f takes g6, and this weak pawn on g6 is the crux of the play that follows, and Carlsen created it with his initial move h5 before, and that's why that was such a good move. So then Carlsen played rook c7 with a dangerous rook on the 7th, and Topalov played rook a1, which is essentially a blunder and ignores the threats around his king. Better here would have been queen d8, which seemingly forks the rook and the knight, but here Carlsen would have had the strong reply queen d3, which keeps a winning advantage. Best play would continue with the rook a1 check, and now queen takes c7 or its mate in 4, again with knight g5 check, h takes g5, queen takes g5, g6 check, king h8, queen h5 check, bishop h6, and queen takes h6 mate. So rook a1 check, king h2, and queen takes e7, and again the rook can't be taken or it's mate in 4 as before. But here Carlsen would have knight f6 check, and Topalov would have been forced to take with the queen. If bishop takes f6, then e takes f6, and after queen f7, rook takes d7, and it's game over. So queen takes f6 is forced, and then would come of course e takes f6, and then knight takes f6. But even in this continuation, white is of course far better, and the game continued in a similar fashion anyway. After rook a1 check from Topalov came king f2, then queen d8 and queen d3 with the same threats as before, mainly knight g5 with mating threats. So Topalov played queen takes e7, and then came rook takes d7, and now white has a winning advantage. And Topalov had a couple of checks, but they came to nothing. Like it just queen h4 check, king f3, queen h5 check, and king g3. And now black has no more checks and can do nothing to stop white's raging attack. So Topalov resigned here. Like no matter what he does, it's a force mate in a maximum of 7 moves. The sample continuation is say for example king h8, because the threat is knight to f6, winning the queen because this bishop can't take, it's pinned by the rook. So say king h8, then rook d8 check, king h7, queen d7, and now the threat here is knight f6, which would be mate now because the king can't move to the back rank. And the only way for black to stop this is to sacrifice his queen, just with something like queen takes e5, and after f takes e5. And again here black would have to sacrifice just to delay the mate, so rook a3 check, takes a3, and then h5, knight f6 check, king h6, rook h8 check, bishop takes h8, knight g8 check, king g5, queen d2 check, king f5, queen f4 is mate. So it's absolutely brilliant game from Carlsen, and I think he's second at the moment in the tournament itself. So I'll do another couple of his games as the tournament goes on, and we'll see how they go. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.